The sound of papers scattering across our imported marble floor echoed through our penthouse living room. I watched years of careful documentation flutter around me like expensive confetti while my husband, Michael, stood over me with that familiar look of smug superiority. "Really, Rebecca," he said, adjusting his Rolex. "You thought you could just walk into my office and accuse me of fraud? With what evidence? These?" He kicked at one of the fallen folders. "No one's going to believe the trophy wife who spends her days planning charity galas. My name is Rebecca Sterling, and at 34, I was about to destroy the man I'd been married to for 8 years." Michael saw what he wanted to see, a beautiful former model who'd given up her career to be the perfect corporate wife. What he didn't see was the economics degree from Penn, or the 2 years I'd spent in forensic accounting before meeting him. "You're right," I said, keeping my voice steady as I knelt to gather the scattered papers. "What was I thinking?" He laughed, already dismissing me as he pulled out his phone. "I have a meeting downtown. Clean this up before the housekeeper sees it. And Becca." He paused at the door. "Let's not have this conversation again. Stick to what you're good at, looking pretty and keeping my social calendar in order." The moment the elevator doors closed behind him, I stopped picking up papers and instead pulled out my phone, sending a quick text to my sister Lauren. "It's time. Meet me at the usual place in an hour." Then I walked to our bedroom, straight to my jewelry box. The antique locket that had belonged to my grandmother hung innocently among the expensive pieces Michael had given me over the years. He'd never understood why I insisted on wearing such a simple piece to important events when I had millions in diamonds at my disposal. I opened the locket now, carefully removing the tiny flash drive hidden behind the old photograph. 8 years of evidence meticulously collected and backed up, all stored in something he'd dismissed as sentimental junk. The cafe where I met Lauren was deliberately chosen, small, cash only, and far from Michael's usual haunts. My sister was already there, her laptop open and ready. "You finally confronted him," she said as I sat down, no preamble needed. "We've been planning this for months." I nodded, pulling out the flash drive. He reacted exactly as we expected. Condescending, dismissive, certain I couldn't touch him. Lauren's fingers flew across the keyboard as she began downloading the files. "Does he have any idea how long you've been watching him?" "No," I said, wrapping my hands around a cup of coffee. "He still thinks I spend my days getting manicures and planning his precious charity events." The truth was far more complex. I'd discovered Michael's fraud almost by accident 3 months into our marriage. A misfiled document, a series of numbers that didn't add up, and suddenly I'd seen behind a curtain of his real estate empire. At first, I'd been in denial. Michael Sterling was one of Boston's most respected developers, known for transforming struggling neighborhoods into luxury properties. His company, Sterling Development, was worth hundreds of millions. Surely I was misreading the documents, but then I started paying attention, really paying attention. The community improvement projects that mysteriously fell through after he'd received government grants. The historic buildings that suffered convenient accidents right after he purchased them at low prices. The string of shell companies that seemed to exist only to move money between accounts. "Look at this," Lauren said now, turning her laptop screen toward me. She'd pulled up one of Michael's recent developments, a luxury high-rise in what used to be a working-class neighborhood. The numbers don't match what he reported to the city council. He claimed the project would cost $50 million, but according to these bank transfers, he only spent $30 million. I finished. The rest disappeared into offshore accounts, and that's just one project. Lauren shook her head, her expression grim. "How did he get away with this for so long?" "Because he's careful. He spreads the fraud across multiple projects, multiple companies. Unless you're looking at the whole picture, each discrepancy seems minor." I took another sip of coffee. "Plus, he has half the city council in his pocket. Amazing what regular charitable donations can buy." My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Dinner with the Andersons tonight. Wear the blue versus, and be more pleasant than you were this morning." I showed the message to Lauren, who rolled her eyes. "God, he's such a patronizing ass. How did you stand it for 8 years?" "Because I needed to be sure," I said quietly. Sure of the evidence, sure of his guilt, sure that when I finally moved against him, it would stick. The truth was, it had taken years to understand the full scope of Michael's operation. He wasn't just defrauding investors and government agencies. He was destroying communities, forcing out longtime residents so he could build luxury properties that sat half empty while he collected tax breaks. The FBI contact is ready, Lauren said, lowering her voice even though no one was near our table. Agent Martinez says as soon as we give him the signal, they'll move. I nodded, thinking of the careful groundwork we'd laid. The recordings hidden in Michael's home office, capturing conversations with corrupt officials. The paper trail I'd pieced together showing how he laundered money through fake renovation projects. The witness statements from former employees who'd been silenced with threats and payoffs. What about the safety deposit boxes? Lauren asked. Already taken care of, I assured her. I moved everything to the new location last week while he was in New York. Bank records, backup drives, original documents, it's all secure. My sister reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Are you sure you want to go through with this, once we pull the trigger? He has to be stopped, I said firmly. You haven't seen what I've seen, Lauren. The families displaced by his developments, the small businesses forced to close, the lives he's ruined while he sits in his penthouse counting his millions. Lauren nodded, understanding in her eyes. She'd been my confidant through all of this, helping me gather evidence, providing technical support, being my sounding board when the weight of it all became too heavy. The Anderson dinner tonight, she said thoughtfully. That's perfect timing, actually. Half the city's power players will be there. I smiled slightly, already seeing the possibilities. Michael loved these dinners, loved holding court among Boston's elite. He'd never suspect that his perfectly coiffed wife was about to bring his entire empire crashing down. I better go get ready then, I said, standing up. Wouldn't want to disappoint my husband by being late to his important dinner. Back at the penthouse, I took my time getting ready. The blue Versace dress Michael had specified hung in my closet, a $12,000 piece of fabric that was supposed to show off his wealth and taste. I slipped it on, carefully applied my makeup, and fastened my grandmother's locket around my neck. In the mirror, I looked exactly like what Michael thought I was. The beautiful, compliant wife who knew her place. The perfect accessory to his carefully crafted image. If he'd ever bothered to really know me, he might have wondered why I always insisted on handling the seating arrangements for his business dinners. Why I volunteered to organize his charitable foundation's documents. Why I spent so much time in his home office, supposedly planning social events. But Michael saw what he wanted to see, and tonight that blindness would be his undoing. The Andersons' dining room was filled with the quiet murmur of Boston's elite when Michael and I arrived. Robert Anderson's mansion in Beacon Hill was the perfect setting for what was about to unfold. Old money, old power, and enough ego in one room to float a yacht. Rebecca, darling. Sarah Anderson air-kissed my cheeks. That dress is divine. Michael always makes sure you're the most beautiful woman in the room. I smiled, letting the backhanded compliment roll off me. You're too kind. I love what you've done with the place. The new chandelier is exquisite. As we moved through the crowd, I felt Michael's hand on my lower back, steering me towards specific groups. This was our usual dance. He'd talk business while I played the charming wife, laughing at the right moments, making sure everyone's glasses stayed full. Sterling. Commissioner Davis boomed, extending his hand to Michael. Just got the paperwork for the Riverside project. Everything looks in order. I watched Michael's face carefully as he shook the commissioner's hand. The Riverside project, his latest scheme to turn a historic waterfront neighborhood into luxury condos. The paperwork he'd submitted showed a $100 million investment. The real numbers, safely documented in my files, showed something very different. Excellent, Michael said smoothly. The city won't regret supporting this development. It'll transform the whole area. That's what we're afraid of, a quiet voice said from behind us. Elena Martinez stood there, elegant in a simple black dress. To everyone else, she was just another guest, the wife of a prominent real estate attorney. Only I knew she was actually FBI Special Agent Martinez, and this dinner was no coincidence. Michael's smile tightened slightly. Mrs. Martinez, I wasn't aware you and James would be here tonight. Sarah and I serve on a historical preservation board together. Alana said pleasantly. We're quite concerned about the fate of some of our older buildings. So many unfortunate accidents lately. I felt Michael's hand tighten on my waist. Those accidents had helped him acquire prime properties at fraction of their value. after which the historical protection orders mysteriously disappeared. Progress requires change, he said dismissively. Rebecca, why don't you get me a fresh drink? I nodded obediently and headed toward the bar, but instead of ordering, I slipped into the powder room and pulled out my phone. A text from Lauren was waiting. Teams in position. Just say the word. My hands trembled slightly as I replied, now. When I returned to the dining room, everything appeared normal. Guests were taking their seats, servers were pouring wine, and Michael was holding court at the head of the table, explaining his latest development plans to an admiring audience. I sat down beside him, accepting a glass of wine from a server. Any moment now. Right on cue, phones around the table began buzzing. I watched as people pulled them out, faces changing as they read the breaking news alerts. My God, Robert Anderson said from across the table. Michael, is this true? Michael frowned, reaching for his own phone. I saw the exact moment he read the headline. Sterling gewild under federal investigation for massive fraudcen. The color drained from his face as he scrolled through the article. The Boston Globe had done their job well, laying out years of fraudulent dealings backed by documents and witness statements. His careful house of cards was about to collapse. This is ridiculous, he sputtered, looking around the table. Obviously some sort of mistake. Is it? Elena Martinez stood up, pulling out her badge. Michael Sterling, I'm Special Agent Martinez with the FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest on multiple counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The dining room erupted in chaos as more agents entered. I sat quietly, sipping my wine as Michael was read his rights in front of Boston's most influential citizens. You? He turned to me, realization dawning in his eyes. You did this. I met his gaze calmly. No, Michael. You did this. I just made sure everyone would know about it. You stupid bitch, he snarled, lunging toward me, but agents quickly restrained him. You think you can understand my business? You're nothing but a trophy wife. I finished for him, standing up. That's what you wanted, isn't it? Someone beautiful and seemingly simple who wouldn't ask questions about where the money came from or why those historic buildings kept having convenient accidents. I reached for my locket, opening it to reveal the empty space where the flash drive had been. But you never bothered to look past the surface. Never wondered why I was so interested in handling your paperwork, organizing your files. You just assumed I was decorative, like everything else in your life. The room had gone silent, watching the scene unfold. I could see the moment it hit him, every private conversation in his office, every meeting with corrupt officials, every deal he thought was safely hidden. I'd been there, watching, documenting, building the case that would bring him down. Mrs. Sterling, Agent Martinez said formally, we'll need you to come in tomorrow to make a formal statement. I nodded, gathering my clutch. Of course. I have all the documentation you'll need. Bank records, property assessments, evidence of bribes. 8 years worth. 8 years. Michael's voice was barely a whisper. You've been planning this for 8 years? No, I corrected him. I've been gathering evidence for 8 years. I started planning this the day I found out you were destroying people's lives to build your empire. The day I realized that the man I married was nothing but a fraud in an expensive suit. As the agents led him away, I turned to the stunned dinner guests. I apologized for disrupting the evening. Sarah, the salmon was lovely. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of depositions, interviews, and legal proceedings. Michael's empire began to crumble as investors pulled out and projects were halted. The evidence I'd gathered was damning, not just of him, but of numerous city officials and business partners who had enabled his schemes. Lauren helped me move out of the penthouse, into a modest but comfortable apartment far from the luxury high-rises Michael had built. What will you do now? She asked as we unpacked boxes. I smiled, pulling out my diploma and CPA license, things I'd kept hidden for years. I'm thinking of starting a consulting firm, helping small businesses and community organizations protect themselves from developers like Michael. Maybe do some forensic accounting on the side. The trophy wife turning corporate watchdog, Lauren laughed. I love it. The media had a field day with the story, of course. Sociality Anges Diewund Heor UPTDVELPER made headlines across the country. But what mattered more were the other stories, The families who could return to their neighborhoods, the small businesses that would survive, the communities that would stay intact. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom watching Michael plead guilty to multiple federal charges. He looked smaller somehow, without his expensive suits and air of invincibility. The defendant is sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, the judge announced, and ordered to pay restitution of $400 million. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for a statement. I thought about all the times I'd stood beside Michael at press conferences, playing my part as the silent, beautiful wife. Mr. Sterling's crimes weren't just about money, I said into the microphones. They were about power, about the belief that wealth makes you untouchable. But no one is above the law, and no one should be allowed to destroy communities for profit. Later that evening, I sat in my new office, looking out over the city. My consulting firm was already gaining a reputation for helping expose corporate fraud and protecting community interests. The phone rang. Another potential client seeking help. As I reached for it, my grandmother's locket caught the light. I touched it gently, thinking of how such a small thing had helped bring down an empire. It reminded me of something my grandmother used to say. The most dangerous weapon against evil is the truth, carried by someone everyone underestimates. Michael had built his world on lies, seeing only what he wanted to see. He'd wanted a trophy wife, so that's why I let him see, never realizing that sometimes the most effective weapon is the one hiding in plain sight.